Hello friends, language is the link that connects human beings to human beings. As they say, animals have sounds, but human beings have voices. Animals grunt, roar, bleat, mew or purr, but human beings speak. Language is not incidental to a subject. Language does not always happen to a subject, but language is a subject unto itself. The subject of languages or the science of languages that we call as linguistics. What is linguistics? What is its history? Where from has it got originated? And what is its contemporary significance? For the same questions, we'll have the answers from one of the noted intellectuals, Professor Shafi Shok, Dean, Faculty of Arts, Head of the Department of Kashmiri, University of Kashmir. Thank you very much, sir. I welcome you in our program.
Thank you.
So we begin with the simplest possible question for the students of linguistics. That is, what is linguistics?
What is linguistics? As you rightly said, linguistics is the science of languages, the study of languages. It is the language through which we think and understand different aspects of the world around us. But when the language itself becomes the subject of your thinking, and when we just go into details how the language is the medium of thinking in itself, so it becomes a different discipline of knowledge, and it embraces different fields. For instance, how languages generate themselves, how the sounds of the language are articulated, how we can compare two or more than two languages, how languages can be classified. So similarly, when in applied linguistics, we see how it is applied in medicine science, in literature, in psychology and other disciplines of knowledge. So it becomes a multidisciplinary course of study, a multidisciplinary knowledge in itself, sphere of knowledge. So it has different aspects.
So what you mean is that linguistics is basically that science, that discipline that deals with different ramified branches of knowledge,
right.
say classification or categorization that deals with sound or anything. Now the immediate question that can be asked is that how old is the concept and when did it get originated?
Languages are as old as human beings itself on
That's
the
about
surface of
languages.
Earth, the language. But thinking about language through language is not so old. History can be stretched as far as the Greek times, so say 300 BC or like that. In ancient Greece, the beginning of this discipline of knowledge we see in the Greek times when it was at the zenith of culture and civilization. So there were certain philosophers like Democritus, Plato, before him Socrates and Aristotle, who started the discourse on language itself, what language in itself is. And it looked a marvelous subject because some things which we take for granted, for instance, language is generally taken for granted, but when we think about the language itself, it becomes a marvelous subject. So this marvelous subject got its beginning in ancient Greece, and later on it had certain developments in Roman civilization, but there was a parallel stream of linguistics here in the subcontinent when Panini wrote the grammar of Sanskrit. So, but so far as modern rational science of linguistics is concerned, we see its beginning in ancient Greece, but it has passed through different stages and it has developed into the modern times in a very systematic way. But the term linguistics is not as old as the subject it is. The subject
it's
is
a late entry.
It is a late entry, very recent. It was in 1847 when the term was in itself invented for this kind of discourse. Before that, there were other terms. For instance, in ancient Greece, we used to have traditional grammar. Rhetoric was there, logic was there, and other disciplines. For instance, it was a branch of philosophy itself, the quest for truth. When the quest of truth was there, the search for the origin of languages, how the languages get originated, was also a part of that discussion, what truth is
Yes.
about. And so, but it has different names in different times. The term linguistics was a recent entry in 1847.
So do you think that this is fascinating and at the same time bewildering to talk about
Right.
words in words, to write about words through words?
Yes, and all these things are abstractions. The words are themselves abstract, and where from the psychological, the part of your mind that generates these infinite words out of the finite sounds is itself a bewildering, really a bewildering subject. So there is a scope of discussion, scope of disagreement, and many things are to happen in the field in future also.
Sir, in your answer you mentioned
Yes.
two classical arts, one rhetoric and second logic.
Logic,
I add a
yes.
third one, and that's grammar.
Yes, grammar.
For our students, will you give a brief overview
Right.
of the three classical arts that have been so indispensable to the whole philosophy of language?
Right, right. So, in ancient Greece, the linguistics, when it did not have the name linguistics, there were three separate subjects. And all the three subjects were the umbrella term philosophy. Philosophy was the only discipline that was recognized with a name that had a nomenclature. The three aspects, grammar, rhetoric, and logic, were the branches of philosophy. By grammar they meant the parts of speech, what a noun is, what a verb is, what a preposition is, and it was Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle who invented these names: noun, verb, preposition, and other parts of speech. So when they studied the sentence making, the sequential arrangement of words, it was grammar. When they applied to, since they were great speakers at the same time, they addressed it because they were trying to have a utopian republic. So rhetoric was their main concern, how a speaker should address the common masses.
That is purely about articulation.
Articulation and stimulating the audience towards a certain direction. So since the language has the force of stimulation, this language has the force of persuasion.
Or sometimes misleading somebody.
Misleading also. So it was a part of rhetoric at that time, how hyperbole should be used, how a metaphor should be used, where should emphasis be laid on words, and how certain words are to be deleted, and how certain words are to be overshadowed. And this was
all these ingredients put together.
And so when the third branch, logic, was concerned, it was more a part of philosophy, because they were in the quest of truth, what God is, for instance. It was their first concept, was theirs. What is beyond this material reality? How we can manipulate sentences and words to reach at certain conclusions about truth beyond material existence. So logic was also there when the meaning of meanings was the main subject. How the meanings are they attributed to the words by the users, or the words have themselves the meanings inherent to them. This was the main concern of the logic.
Sir, a concept that is inherently being linked with the linguistics, not only linguistics, but in almost all the forms of social sciences, and that is structuralism.
Right.
My question is simple, that what is structuralism, and why was all the focus laid on the structure?
Yes, it was the word structuralism was first of all used by Ferdinand de Saussure, a Spanish linguist, who was a professor, and his notes were published posthumously by his students, and that was a course in general linguistics. So When it was published, it caused a great revolution in the whole world, and not only in linguistics but in philosophy, in literature, in psychology, and all fields of knowledge.
Did it problematize the whole concept of language?
Yes, because before structuralism, language was subservient to other fields. For instance, in ancient Greek times, it was subservient to philosophy. For instance, their main concern was whether language is a matter of convention or it is natural. For instance, the words we have for certain things, for instance, there is a stone. Is there anything inherent in that stone that it is called a stone, or it is just a matter of convention that we call it a stone? And so this was the main concern, whether language is natural or a convention. And similarly, whether language is systematic, since they believed that the whole cosmos, the whole world has a system. It has been consciously structured, so it must be systematic. So language too must be systematic. Whether it was systematic or it was full of anomalies, these were the two main concerns of this study of language before structuralism. But language in itself was not the subject of study before structuralism. Structuralism has many facets, and the basic concepts of structuralism were first of all propounded by Ferdinand de Saussure. So it is a vast subject. For instance, we can say how it was different from the subject before Ferdinand de Saussure. Before Ferdinand de Saussure, it was called comparative philology or philology, just philology. But when we talk of modern linguistics, it got originated from Ferdinand de Saussure's concepts. His concepts were various, but 4 or 5 main, the key concepts he gave that were novel, that were a great departure from the traditional grammar, where, for instance, languages exists at 2 levels. First of all, the lang that is inherent in human being, that makes us capable to understand languages or speak languages. That is our mental faculty, our linguistic competence, that
lies in the hindsight,
inside,
that precedes
expression, because we are born with that. It is innate to us, it is inherent to human beings, not to any other humans. It is species specific, it is just a human capability, that lang that is in our mind. And then the parole, the actual performance of language, when in a certain linguistic situation we perform that competence that is inherent in us. These were the 2 concepts, lang and parole, first of all given by Ferdinand de Saussure. See, he said that in the lang, the language structures are quite finite. Just finite out of certain sounds which can be counted, and out of certain kernel sentences, basic sentences, we create in actual performances, we create infinite utterances according to the need of the situation. So this parole is infinite, but the lang is finite. Yeah, and then the study of language is either synchronic or diachronic.
So you will have to first explain the 2 concepts of synchronic approach to linguistics and diachronic approach. Besides being modern and traditional, what lies there in the whole concept?
By diachronic study of the language, Ferdinand de Saussure meant how a particular language has originated. How can it be classified on its genealogical affinity, on the basis of its genealogical affinity, how it has descended down to us and undergone certain changes with the contact of other cultures that have come into immediate contact with the community of that particular language, and how we can restructure the old forms This is the diachronic.
So does it also include the corruption and the modification that a language undergoes?
Not only corruption and modifications, but evolution of a particular language.
Yes.
Particular, because every language is in a flux. No language is static. Only certain dead language, what we call dead languages. Dead languages, for instance, Sanskrit is a dead language because it does not have any area of occurrence. When a language has its community speakers, it has an area of occurrence, then its changeability is natural to it. It has to change. The language that ceases to change becomes a dead language, because the community that speaks a language in itself changing with the changing situations, changing technological developments, material developments, economical developments, social developments. So when the community changes itself, the language has to change. If a language does not change, it ceases to exist. So the evolution,
that's diachronic.
it is the diachronic. Through ages, through times, diachronic, more than one period of time. Study of a particular language,
yes.
Not specific to any particular period, but through the periods that linguistic community has come down
and
to the present times.
Now it's synchronic.
Synchronic can be interpreted in two ways. Either the contemporary situation of a particular language, for instance, here in India, here in Kashmir, for instance, Kashmiri is a language of the Indo-European stock. How it is spoken right now in this 21st, in the early years of this 21st century, in a particular economic and social setup, we will study this language with reference to this situation that exists now, in which the community is passing through in this process of living, a process of being in time, with reference to any particular time. This is one approach to synchronic linguistics. The other is we choose any particular period of the history of this language, for instance, the 14th century. If we have extensive literature available, manuscripts available of the 14th century, we will delimit our study to that 14th century and study how this language existed in that particular period of language when Islam and Hinduism and Shaivism came into confluence, and how the language reflected that change in the 14th century. That too is synchronic, because we delimit our study to any one particular
period.
Well,
that's a case study. That's being particularly focused on a particular time period.
Yes, so that is synchronic. Syn means one, chronic means time.
Yes.
One time, with reference to any particular one time.
That's quite clear, sir. Now, sir, coming out of classical age and the importance language held then into the modern age, and we talk about one of the greatest linguists, that's Noam Chomsky of America. When he says that linguistics should not confine itself only to the description of language, but instead there is a need of having a universal grammar that will hold good everywhere, in every region of the earth. As an expert of literature, do you think that it's a possibility to have a universal grammar that can apply to all the languages available?
It's not a possibility of having a universal grammar, but it is there. Noam Chomsky's contention is that underneath the bewildering variety of human speeches, there are 6,000 major languages of the world, and then many innumerable smaller languages, and some languages are yet to be explored. So underneath this bewildering variety,
it's a welter of languages.
Definitely. And beneath that, there is a universal grammar. Because all these languages, whatever their phonetic realization is, whatever the fashion of speech is, whatever the community is, originate from that universal basis of language. And by that universal grammar, he meant, it's not that they have come out of one language, no. All these languages get originated from that universal, because the modes of cognition of human beings are the same. For instance, the ambience that surrounds us here in Kashmir is almost the same what is there in China, what is there in Germany, what is there in Africa, because most of the things are common, and our approach to our externals is also common. For instance, fire is there. Our approach to fire is the same.
That's one.
Our approach to cold is the same. Our approach to stones is the
So
same.
it
Our
should
approach to
find
the
a
jungle is the
uniform. It should find a uniform expression also.
No, it is by this universal basis of all these languages. He meant what Ferdinand de Saussure had already called the lang, wherefrom these infinite sentences get originated, because there are certain templates. Noam Chomsky added the concept of kernel sentences. They are not meaningful sentences, but the formulae of sentences. For instance, he divided infinite sentence. By infinite, he means millions of sentences, billions of sentences. He reduced all these sentences to a few countable kernel sentences, which are the basis of this bewildering variety of sentences. For instance, there is simple sentence, what he called a SAD, S-A-A-D, a simple affirmative, active and declarative sentence.
Yes.
So this is
That's
common
quite
to
a
all
beautiful
languages.
acronym that has been.
Yes, SAD, S-A-A-D,
SAAD,
a simple affirmative and active declarative sentence. For instance, I took tea. This is a basic simple sentence. So this is common to all the languages of the world, whatever it is. This is the kernel. So first comes the noun phrase, and then the verb phrase, and then the another noun phrase. This is the simple active declarative sentence. Before they undergo any modification, before they undergo any transformation. This is one sentence. Then the other sentence, question type sentence, and then the for instance, and there is relativization. For instance, when we subjugate one sentence in the noun phrase of another sentence, how it is the same in all languages. And then the coordinate structure and the complementation also. These are 10, 12 basic sentence patterns. They are the basis of that lang, or what Noam Chomsky gave another name, linguistic competence.
Linguistic competence.
Linguistic competence. This is common to all languages, so universal grammar, and not only at the syntactic basis, but also at the semantic basis. At the basis of the meanings we attribute to different things around us. For instance, as I quoted one example, stone is there.
Yes.
Stone is stone, just a stone. But our meanings attributed to it differ from person to person. Not only that, there are different varieties of stones, different sizes of stones, different colors of stones, but also, for instance, I know nothing about chemistry, but a stone to a chemist is silicon oxide. To him, it's a mass of silicon oxide. And if the same stone is before a person who makes chips of computers, to him it is a different thing. And to a layman, to a farmer, it is a different thing. He can stop it.
So it carries different messages to different classes of people.
Of society. Your approach to that. So our approach to the externals that surround us in this world are different. So since our approaches, our functions, our purposes of using language are different, and so we attribute different meanings to different things according to our cognition. Although when we encounter a new language, we are sometimes taken aback how this language has originated, how we are able to understand this language. For instance, Chinese is almost unintelligible to the Indians.
Yes.
It looks like a different species.
As we say all in Greek, now we can say all in Chinese also.
All in Chinese. But if we approach this language, it is so simple, so sweet as Hindi is. Only one thing is there, when we in Hindi, in Hindustani, we amalgamate these different sounds. They have different. It is analytic. They break into parts. Cho, chi, cha, pu. So this.
Well,
this
that
type
can
of
be
thing.
understood only if you speak it out, or if you can
Yes,
adequately
yes.
write it down. So you made a brief allusion to cognition. Before
Right.
I wind up,
Right.
I need a very quick response from you. That is it a relationship between the cognitive behavior of a human being and the language, which the modern linguistics, Steven Pinker, points towards?
Cognition is not possible without language. It is now universally accepted thing. It is language that creates cognition. Unless you have abundant linguistic competence, you are not able to cognize things. You are not able to understand the reality around you. You are not able to understand even yourself. You are not able to understand even the language in itself. Will not be able to speak as we speak right now. It is the language that creates this continuous process of cognition. Before we started this discussion, we did not know in which direction this will go, and many subjects that we had in our mind have been left out, and new subjects have come, new things have crept into our discussion, emerged, because this cognition itself, the language is almost a self-generating process. So when it is self-generating, cognition also becomes independent of you. So there is the scope of your difference of opinion, different approach to life. Yes.
Sir, I thank you very much. I have only this brief answer, because if many things have been left out, they will be taken up in the next part of the same program. So till then, I thank you very much for being with us and for having this discourse about linguistics. So Professor Shafi Shok, talking about languages, languageability, the science of language, the contemporary significance, the history, and many things more. We have a lot to discuss about. That will be in the second part of the same program. Till then, goodbye.